Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Battle with Ola. My name is Mujala Olua. As I always say, the Ola is from Mujala Olua. So today we want to continue our discussion on mediation. You'd recall that I've done 3 videos on mediation already, and I said that I was going to do 6 videos to chronicle, my experience as a mediator so far. I've told you that I have been a mediator for over 14 months. That's a year and almost a half, at a government-owned mediation center. And I'm just using these videos to reflect on my experience so far and what I've learned as a mediator and from the whole mediation process, and to encourage it as a viable option and as a viable and practicable ADR technique or ADR option, alternative dispute resolution option. So I hope that you've been following. Please do, and please go watch videos 1, 2, 3. This is video 4, and in this video we're going to be talking about the benefits of mediation. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to draw out the benefits from the definition that we talked about, in the first video, and it is that 1, mediation is voluntary. That's a benefit of mediation. It's voluntary. Now, there are several, nuances to the voluntariness of mediation. For instance, we could compare it to litigation, where, you are compelled to come to court to answer a case against you once a case has been filed against you, either by the state in a criminal matter or by, a civilian like you in a civil matter. So you're compelled, you have no choice, no option in the matter. You have to show up, get a lawyer, or if you want to represent yourself, if it's allowed, you have to just go to court and answer the case against you. But in mediation, it is voluntary. So even if a party asks you to go to mediation, you might decide not to go. That's one. Then you might go, and then you might decide that, when I got there, I don't like the mediator. I feel like the mediator is being biased. Or maybe along the line, during the mediation process, you can decide that I'm no longer doing this, I'm going, I'm leaving. So it's still voluntary up until you sign, an agreement, a memorandum of understanding. Mediation is completely voluntary. So you could at any point, opt out. So that's it's non-binding, like I said, in that first video. So that's another aspect of it being voluntary. So as opposed to litigation and probably other means of ADR, mediation is voluntary. So that's one benefit. Also, parties can decide that, we want to go to this mediation center, or we want to submit ourselves to this mediator. You know that for litigation, you have to go to the prescribed court. For instance, if it's a labor matter, the court has already, there's a specialized court for that. That's National Industrial Court. So you have to go to that court for that matter. If it's a criminal matter, there are some specialized criminal courts, or you could go to a general court. But in other instances, if the crime has been committed in a state, you have to go to the court that is nearest, the jurisdiction that is nearest the place of commission of the crime. So many other rules and regulations are attached to litigation, but when it comes to mediation, it is very voluntary. So parties have, a say to a very large extent, and that will lead me to the next benefit. It is party-centric. Party-centric in the sense that you can choose your venue, you can choose the time that you want, you can choose the mediator or the mediation center that you want to administer the session or to preside over the session. And you can decide a lot of things. You can decide if you want to stay or if you want to go. You can decide the issues that you want the mediator to mediate upon. If it's a matrimonial dispute, for instance, if it's just child custody or child maintenance that you want the mediator to mediate upon, you can delineate the issues. The person or the mediator does not have to meddle into the entire family affair, so it's really party-centric. And also party-centric as in parties will make their own decisions. Okay, the mediator will just facilitate the process, to ensure that they arrive at what is fair, doable, and certain, but parties will make their own decision. We compare it to litigation again, and we see that the judge, the court, makes the decisions in litigation. But in mediation, parties make the decision. If you look at arbitration, another type of ADR, the arbitrator will make the decision. But in mediation, parties make their own decision. They agree, they continue to shift for one another through the process of compromise until they reach a decision that is fair and practicable. And then they reduce it to writing and sign, and the mediator signs as well. Parties make their decision, so it's party-centric. That's another benefit of mediation. Then a very important benefit of mediation is that it reduces the wait time to or for justice. When we look at litigation can take a lot of time. You have cases that have gone on for 10 years and counting, and they are not even near, it's not yet uhuru for the litigants. So in mediation, it's faster, so you can almost predict when or how long the case would last for, especially because it's party centric. So parties can decide that we don't want this to be prolonged, we're going to submit to the jurisdiction of the mediator on so and so issues, and let's have 2 or 3 sessions. So when you meet first session, and if you cannot reach a compromise or an agreement, you can decide, okay, let's meet a second session. If you cannot reach a compromise, you can meet for a 3rd session, and so on and so forth. But generally mediation is shorter in time frame than litigation because it's party centric. So parties can decide their own fate. So no reasonable party will then prolong the session once you know that the destiny of the matter lies in your own hands. So mediation is one of the means by which we reduce the wait time for people who are wronged, their wait time for justice. Mediation cuts short that period of waiting for litigation, which can take longer than necessary or expected. That for litigation there are court dockets are usually full, and so you have little influence on how long your case will really take in court, because it's not only you, every other person is coming to court as well. But for mediation, because you will choose your own mediator, your own mediation center, you can always make sure that you find a mediator or a mediation center that is not that busy, and then you can be sure that you can take your case to a place where its actions will be expedited on it, and you will be able to arrive at the solution on time. So it reduces wait time to justice or for justice, and that will lead me to the next benefit. It reduces the court dockets. So it frees up the court dockets. That's one of the things that mediation does. When parties, as more people begin to embrace mediation, it helps to do away with the need to actually go to court, go on to litigation, and as such it will free up the court docket. It will free up the cost list in court, such that the court can now attend to other matters, especially matters that cannot be subject to litigation. So win-win for everyone. If the court, the business of the court is reduced to what it cannot but do or adjudicate upon alone, it will make life easier, and it will make even the wait time for or to justice reduced, like I said in the first instance, so that people whose matters can be subjected to mediation will go on to mediation, and people who cannot but go to litigation will go on to litigation, and everybody is happy. So that's one of the things that it does. It frees up the court's docket. Another benefit of mediation, which I have hinted on before, is that the decision is binding, but the process is non-binding. So parties can decide to withdraw, at any point in time. For instance, you could get a mediator that is biased already, that is siding with one party instead of being neutral and adjudicating with impartiality. So if that's the case, you can decide to withdraw. So mediation, the process is non-binding, but the decision is binding. Then mediation is cheap, very cheap and affordable. For instance, at our own mediation center established by the government, we are being paid by the government, so parties do not have to pay a dime. I think the only thing that parties pay for at our center is for dispatch. So you just pay the person that will take your letter to the respondent, just a little something for them to transport themselves to take your letter where it ought to go to. And you even have the option of collecting the letter yourself and taking it to the other party. So even at that, you might not need to pay. That's about all that people have to pay for at our mediation center. So it's really cheap and free. I know that it's not all mediation centers or mediation organizations that are free, but when compared to litigation, I know that it's relatively cheap. It's very cheap. If you go to the multi-door courthouse too, what you would have to pay for your session, maybe for them to open a file for you or what have you, it will be very minimal when compared to what you have to pay for litigation. You know, in litigation you have to pay your lawyer, you have to pay filing fees, you have to pay appearance fees, and you know, all other incidental fees and expenses, and then you have to transport yourself to court each time you eat, you know, if the court takes long, you know, all of that, it's a whole lot of expenses. And then, you know, if they continue to file processes along the way, you know, motions and what have you, you have to keep paying for all of that. So litigation can be pretty expensive when compared to mediation. For mediation, you pay practically next to nothing, or whatever you pay will pale in comparison to what you pay for litigation. So it is cheap, almost free, very affordable. That's another, you know, advantage. Another benefit of mediation is that it helps to preserve party relations. You know that people say something in Yoruba, translated in English, it means that, you know, we don't go to court and come back as friends. That is, litigation encourages animosity between parties, but when we talk about mediation, it encourages peace. It encourages, you know, amity between parties. You know, you don't have to fight dirty. So that's one thing that mediation does. So sometimes we find that in our mediation center, during our sessions, sometimes we see that when parties continue to talk and talk, state your side, state your side, state your side, sometimes they end up, you know, believing the things that make them, you know, friends or lovers or what have you, depending on what type of matter it is. So at the end of the day, we find out that we have we have resuscitated something sweet and something friendly, something loving in one party towards the other. And because parties are not bound to swear under oath, and we're not bound by the rules of technicalities, there's little or no reason why a party has to lie or keep up an appearance of who they are not in mediation. So mediation makes parties vulnerable, and so they are often encouraged to come out fully. They tell us even things they would not tell another soul in mediation sessions. And it's a kind of soul bearing for them. It's a kind of it brings them to a point of self-appraisal. So it helps parties to, you know, think back on their relations. If it's a contract, a business relationship, a matrimonial relationship, an employment relationship, whatever it is, even sale of land and whatever, it helps them to go back to where they started. Most times they reflect on, you know, the things that brought them together, and sometimes at the end of the session, those things are strengthened within them, and they go back, you know, better, you know, in their relations. That's not always the case, but what I'm saying is that because parties are not compelled to stick to technicality so that they can win, because it's not win-lose, it's win-win. You know that you're not going to go and you know that you're not going to come and go back a loser. You would win something, the other party would also win something. So you're encouraged to tell the truth. You're encouraged to be sincere, to be honest, and you're encouraged to you know, assume a disposition that actually helps the matter to be resolved in good time. So that's another benefit of mediation. The benefits of mediation, they abound. You know, mediation is really good. It's something that should be encouraged, and something that you should try out if you ever have any dispute with anyone before you even go to litigation. And lastly, I'd like to say that one other thing that mediation, one other advantage of mediation is that it encourages doable and practicable solutions. You know that the court will compel you to do something, whether you can do it or not. I know that I always say on this channel that the law or the courts do not compel an impossibility. But what I'm saying is that, for instance, if someone has asked for damages up to the tune of millions and what have you, if the court finds justification in the person's matter, they might compel you to pay it. Meanwhile, you might not have it. But in mediation, it is what you agree. So when you're asking for, say, 5 million naira, the other party might say, I have 3 million naira, please take it like that. And then you say, make it 4, and they say, okay, let me add 3,200,000 naira, please. And then we appeal to you as the mediator. Do you think this is something they can pay, and pay in good time, so as not to defeat the whole process, so that we don't agree on them paying what they cannot actually afford or pay in good time? Why not just take this and move on? You know, if then how are they going to pay it? Oh, I want to pay 20,000 naira. every month. That is ridiculous. How long do you want to take to finish paying 3,200,000? So we help parties reach a doable settlement such that nobody loses at the end of the day. So as opposed to the court, which will compel what you can sometimes cannot readily do, mediation encourages something that you can do as the solution, the settlement. So that is what is fair, and it's even better because the court will just make an order. They don't care whose ox is God. But in mediation, we try to help you see reason why you are going to do what you're going to do, so that you will do it with Jesus' joy in your heart. So no one is compelling you. You would reflect on the reasons. When it's time for you to keep your side of the agreement, you reflect on the reasons that, okay, I remember the mediator said for peace to reign. I remember the mediator said so that our relationship is not destroyed. I remember that, I agreed to this because I'm hoping that I might still do business with this person in the future, so that I don't destroy that relationship. So mediation helps you to reach a reasonable point of settlement. So when it's time for you to perform your obligations according to the MOU, you do it with full understanding of why you're doing it, and with a sense of willingness that might not be found if it were court compelled in litigation. So those are some of the advantages and benefits of mediation. Do you have a dispute? Try mediation today. I will see you in my very next video. Toodles.